Hello, everybody. Welcome to the very first The 50/50 Project. This is Sarah. I am so happy to finally be doing this with all of you. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I do realize when I say everyone right now, that could simply just be my mother, possibly my brother, and some very nice relatives and friends that are tuning in. And I definitely just want to say thank you. I love all of you. And thank you, for the people that have liked the Facebook page that don't have any idea who I am or what I was doing. I really appreciate your patience while I was getting all of this up and running, and I'm really excited to be sharing this with you guys. If you are one of the people that have no idea who I am or what I'm doing here, never fear, because that is, I rhymed, I didn't mean to. Um, that is what this podcast is for. It's my turn to introduce myself to you, let you know how this podcast came about and what I'm hoping to accomplish with it, my intention with it, and more importantly, what I'm really hoping that you all out there, the more that you hear and the more that we post, you can help me accomplish that as well. So definitely want to thank you for joining. The podcast really came about because, like everybody else, the past 18 months or however long we've been in COVID now, who knows, I was doing a lot of the same things that everybody else was doing and just spending a lot of time at home watching TV and watching the news and also watching election stuff. Although I don't really know if anybody knows that there was an election going on. But anyway, there was an election going on unless you missed it. But I was doing a lot of Netflix and things like that. The other thing that I found myself doing a lot of was having conversations with friends over the phone when we couldn't meet in person. Some of them friends that I hadn't talked to in a very long time, and some of them that I talked to all the time. But what started coming up in a lot of these conversations was the lack of representation. Excuse me. It's going to be very obvious that this is my first show, so just bear with me. Um, the lack of representation for people with disabilities. As a disabled woman for 38 years, and having a disability my entire life, this is not a concept that's new to me. And for a lot of people that are in the disabled community that are listening right now, you're not surprised either. So it's not a new concept, lack of representation, and not even just for people with disabilities, but there's minorities all over the country and the globe that we know about, obviously, that have had either lack of representation or negative representation. But what we found ourselves focusing on, my friends and I especially, and some relatives too, were the types of representations that we're missing. And what I mean by that is, well, I think when we think of representation, we think of it in terms of media. We think of it in terms of politics. And certainly those are two big ones, although um, there is a lack of even talking about it, I think, in politics. I think everybody would agree that's not something they hear very often. And if you do see representation of people with disabilities in media, it's typically they're very good actors and actresses, but it's somebody who isn't disabled themselves. There are a few that do a very good job, and I love them, and I'm so grateful for them. Um, but there's very few that are disabled that are taking those roles, and usually, not always, but some of the time, or most of the time, it is a certain type of role. It's a guy that's gotten injured in an automobile accident, and he's really angry and he's hurt, and then there's this really cute nurse that um, comes along and makes him feel better and rescues him. And it's never switched around. There's never a girl with a disability that has a good looking guy as a nurse, any of that. So it's very limited um, to what people automatically think of when they think of somebody that's disabled, not on purpose, but again, just that lack of representation. But also, lack of representation in terms of what does everyday life look like for somebody who's disabled, especially with everything going on right now with COVID and everything else. What does that look like? When we talk about policies in politics, what goes on behind those policies that are affecting people in the disabled community? Oh my goodness. Um, what's going on with those people in that disabled community, and how does it affect them? What are the different types of disabilities, right? I think people would be very surprised to know that there's a lot of different ones, even probably ones that I haven't heard of, to be completely honest. And also, there's different variations within each disability. So just because I have one thing, if my friend has the same exact thing, it's going to be different because the person's going to be different. Their experiences are going to be different. If you're a minority who has a disability, you're going to have a lot more probably negative experiences and not have the representation that you deserve. So what does that look like? And also, what is it like for the people that surround people with disabilities? I have a mother. What is it like to be a parent? What is it like to be the child of a person with a disability? The best friend, the sibling, the employer, the employee. The list goes on and on, right? There's just a lot of things that we don't know, that we don't see about people with disabilities. And so the more that we kept talking about it, um, pardon me, the more that we kept talking about it, the more that I realized that there really just wasn't a platform to have good conversations and maybe lift that level of representation a little bit and tell people what it looks like for me on a daily basis as a disabled person, what it looks like for my mom, what it looks like for my siblings, what it looks like for my friends who are disabled that have different disabilities that are more involved and require more care, and they're losing services because things are being changed around or they're gaining services. All of that stuff is something that it just doesn't really get discussed. And I don't think it's a matter of, always people not wanting to help or wanting to know. I just think they haven't really been provided those platforms. There are a few people, again, doing it, and I love them for that. This podcast started because also started because I was listening to a podcast of a woman that happens to be in the entertainment industry. I'm not going to say her name because I'm not sure if she wants to be on here. So I don't want to call her out or anything, but she was talking about on her podcast how she was injured when she was a teenager. And she, I think, if I'm not mistaken, was in a car accident. And she had to be in a wheelchair for a year, I believe is what she said, and how it really changed her viewpoint on how we view people with disabilities, all the different laws that have to be in place in terms of just building accessibility. So all of those things, I thought it would be really interesting if I could create a platform for people to come on and talk about those things. So that's really what this project is for, and that's what I hope to do every week. And what I wanted to say to you all out there who are listening is my plan is to have guests every week that will talk about those different things, that will talk about what it's like to be the parent of a person with a disability. You'll meet my mom. I do have some friends that are siblings that are going to come on and tell their story. I have some people with disabilities, and these are all different disabilities, that have had children. They're going to come on and talk about the joys and the hardships of that. And my brother may come on at one point, although I'm very nervous to say that out loud. But he may come on at one point. I don't know. And I also have some teachers that I know from when I went to college, and they have a son with a disability, and they're going to come on and talk about that. So I'm really going to highlight these people as much as I can and let them talk. My hope is that, because I'm going to have people on, and then also I will be sharing more of my story as we go on. Towards the end of this podcast, I'll share the beginning of my story, and then I'll pick up from there. But my hope is the more that you all hear, you guys will reach out to me on the Facebook page. If you have not checked that out yet, that's the 50/50 Project. Check that out. Leave a comment on the Facebook page. You can also check out me on Twitter. That's at 50. 50 is spelled out all lowercase 38. You can leave a comment or a question on there. If you have a topic that you want me to cover, please let me know. I'm going to leave this as open as I can, and I am going to try to answer everything. If I don't have an answer for everything, I'm going to do everything I can to bring people on who can represent that. And if you're listening right now and you're saying you have a story to tell or a specific topic that you want to cover, especially if you're in the disabled community or work or involved in that community, this show is for you too. No matter who you are, where you're from, or what political party you belong to, nothing is off limits. I want to know what topic you want to talk about, and if you want to come on here and take over the microphone for an hour, we will record it and I will let you take over. So that is my hope, is the more that you guys hear from me, the more that you guys will want to talk about this and come on here and have questions or topics that you want me to cover. I'm going to try to cover everything from the American with Disabilities Act to, again, like I said, just my daily life and my friends' daily lives and other aspects as far as parenting and the services and laws and everything else that goes with that. So I'm really hoping that the more you guys hear, the more you guys will add to it. So that is really the entire purpose of this podcast and what I'm looking to do. And I want to expand that representation because I think it's really easy, especially with the lack of representation that's happening, and those specific types of representation that's happening, just to assume that, people with a disability are a certain way, or that all disabilities are the same, or that there's not, even division within a certain type of disability. And I want to try to do everything I can to make sure that at least we open up the conversation enough, right? To maybe learn some new things. And I'm going to be learning too if I miss the mark or if I do something that needs to be corrected. I am all for constructive criticism. So feel free to correct me if I say something incorrectly or get a fact wrong. I'm not really out to do statistics on here, but if I do get a fact wrong or something that you think I've hit the mark on, I'm more than willing to listen. Or miss the mark on, rather, I should say. But yeah, so that is really the purpose of this podcast, and I'm really looking forward to what that could possibly be. I did promise you at the beginning of this that to start with, I think it's only fair that if I'm going to ask you to share your stories and your experiences with me, and those experiences and stories, by the way, they can be whatever we want them to be. As I said, they'll be about whatever we choose them to be, but also in terms of they can be joyful, they can be sad, they can be funny, they can be angry. All those things play into it. I think it's easy to get caught up in what can be depressing about having a disability, and a lot of times that's the thing, again, that's only represented where in my life I've been fortunate enough to experience a lot of joy. Or on the flip side of that, there's people that have only seen disabled people being positive all the time, and it hasn't always been a positive experience. They're angry or they've been mistreated and they want to share that, and they want that to be an honest conversation. So that will be a part of it too. So again, I'm leaving that open. And also, let's be honest, there's plenty of funny stuff that goes along with being being a person with a disability. Ugh. See, I told you, no idea what I'm doing. But yeah, there's some really funny things that go along with being a person with a disability, like when you're at your best friend's wedding and she's dancing with her husband, and they're sharing their dance, and your foot plate falls off right in the middle of it, and you have to try to flag down your mother to come and get it without distracting the lucky couple, or the happy couple. So there's plenty of fun stuff where that came from, and I will be sharing more of that as we go forward. My story will be a part of this too, so you guys don't get stuck just answering questions or sharing parts of yourself. I'll try to share as much as I can about my life, and if you have a specific question for me, or if you want to know something specific about me, I'm all ready to go on that. As scary as it is, I think that's only fair. So I did promise at the beginning of this that I would share the beginning of my story, at least to start with. Um, I was born in 1983, and at that time, when I was born a preemie. I was supposed to come in November of that year, but as my mom likes to say, I just decided that I was having so much fun at, at that point and really just wanted to get the party started. So I decided to come in August. And my mom had been very sick with me. It had been a very rough pregnancy. And they knew that I was a preemie, and they knew that I was probably going to have some difficulties. And my mom will tell more specifics on that. She's a nurse, so she has more information on that than I do. But she'll be on here to get specifics. But they did know that I was a preemie, and obviously that I may have some difficulty there. Basically, what happened was I was this. My brother is three and a half years older than I am, and when my mom had me, and they said to her, this baby only has a 50-50 shot of making it. See what I did there? I explained the 50-50 part. That's the 50-50 part. I had a 50-50 chance of living or dying. And my mom, being the amazing woman that she is, knew that she loved me and she was going to do all that she could for me. Decided that they were just going to love me and hope for the best with that 50-50 shot. And thankfully, 38 years later, I made it. But when they first took me home, they didn't really know what to expect in terms of having a preemie. I don't think even nowadays people know quite what to expect when they bring a baby home who's a preemie or who's had complications. But you do have to remember. I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this, guys. You do have to remember that this was 1983, so they didn't have, again, a huge knowledge base, and also they didn't have the testing and the things that you could do prior to find out now about some things, not everything. So my parents really had no idea, and they, the stress of being new parents. Anybody who has kids out there, God knows it's not just people with disabilities. It's everybody. It's a guessing game, what you're gonna bring home and the things that you're gonna face. But they knew they were facing kind of an uphill battle, and they knew that I had that 50-50 shot, and I was probably more prone to having difficulties. My mom tells a story of when I got home from the hospital, the last thing that they wanted me to do was to get sick or anything, right? Because my lungs were, I had been in an incubator, not for a long time, but enough. And my mom tells this story of my dad was a pastor, and my mom went to pick my brother up from church or something like that, and everybody at the church wanted to see me, and she was like, I would literally only let them see your face, and I was like, nobody breathe on her, nobody touch her, because they didn't want me to get sick. So anyway, after I got home, it became apparent pretty quickly that, if you have a baby or you've been around babies, they hit milestones pretty quickly, and start to hit more milestones, and I wasn't doing any of that. I wasn't holding my head up when I should have. I wasn't rolling, or, as the months went on, I wasn't crawling, and I was a very, very fussy baby, which, if you're a friend or a relative, you're laughing right now, because that's not a huge surprise to anybody at all. I apparently was not a very happy baby for the first solid year, possibly, of my life. But anyway, My mom said, when you were supposed to be doing something, instead of just doing it or figuring it out, she said you couldn't, it was almost as if you couldn't move. You couldn't lift your head up or anything like that. And so gradually, as you see that you're supposed to start hitting those milestones, and especially having an older brother who was doing certain things at certain times, they knew what I should be doing and it wasn't happening. So they started the task of, which anybody who's gone through any type of diagnosis knows that it's never easy to do that. They started the task of trying to figure that out. And from what I know of the story, at 8 or 9 months after going to our primary care first, they went to Iowa City, which is a bigger hospital here in the state that I live. And they ran some tests and did a lot of evaluations on me. I do have the evaluations, and they're pretty hysterical. If anybody knows my personality, I'm pretty expressive, and apparently I didn't have any problem doing that, and that's outlined in the reports. But maybe for one of these, I might read a few of them. But anyway, for now, the doctor had ran several tests and done some evaluations, and my mom loves to tell the story about how he ran these tests and he did all these things, and he turns to them, my mom and my dad, and he says, "Okay, we don't need to do anything else. We've got it. We're good." Well, my parents, if you know anything about our family, we get very excited very quickly, and sometimes that can be to our own detriment. And my mom and my dad got really excited and thought that he was saying that there was nothing wrong with me, and I'm using the term wrong with my air quotes that you can't see. But that there was nothing wrong with me, and the doctor quickly, or I think it was the nurse actually, had to interrupt them and say, "No, that's not what he means. He means we don't need to run any tests because we know what's wrong." And what was wrong was my official diagnosis was having cerebral palsy. Some people say cerebral. I say cerebral. It just, same thing. It just a matter of how you're comfortable pronouncing it. And basically, what was explained to them and what I came to know is what I have is a cerebral palsy is really a catch-all term, and it's a very broad term for a brain injury. In my particular case, that happened because I was in distress as a preemie when my mom was carrying me. And basically, it was a brain injury caused from the lack of oxygen due to the brain. And they knew that that's what it was, but what they didn't know was what it was going to look like. And in that, what I mean is you can have like probably a lot of disabilities. There's just a huge spectrum. You can have somebody like me who is pretty independent and can do a lot of things, but I do have to use an electric wheelchair to get around. I can't walk or I don't walk anymore. I can with a walker. I can stand a little bit and take a couple of steps, but it's not something I do on a daily basis. And that is obviously verbal. Hello. And can do a lot of different things, and fortunately can be pretty independent. You can have somebody who's also very independent and very, I guess just independent and can do a lot of things for themselves. They have cerebral palsy, but they can walk. They don't need to use a wheelchair or a walker. I know people that just have it in their hand or one of their arms or one of their legs. It just kind of depends on where you land with that. And then you can go to the other end of the spectrum. I have several friends that need a lot of are very what we would call involved. So they have a lot of trouble moving, a lot of trouble doing certain tasks, normal tasks, or being independent and require a lot of care. And then you do have people that have cerebral palsy that are pretty nonverbal and physically can't do anything as well. So there's a big, huge spectrum, and you have to remember again, they had the test results and knew that it was cerebral palsy, but my parents didn't really know what to expect, and they were kind of flying blind, as most young parents are who have kids. But they also had this added thing on here, and I was just very fortunate that I had parents. Um, I have a sibling or siblings now at this point that did the most to make sure that I would have the best shot at that 50-50 that I was given. That doesn't mean that it's always been easy. There's some days, especially now that I've gotten older, that I barely even feel like I'm hitting double digits in that percentage of what I've been given. But for the most part, I've tried to do as much as I can with that 50% that I've been given. Um, I've been able to be pretty independent. I've been able to go to college. I've been able to go on vacations that I wasn't supposed to be able to go on. I've been able to, thankfully, have a job where I work 40 hours a week. I've still had to use some services in the past, and I'm not right now, and that is a whole other subject for another podcast, but I will get into that. Um, but as I've gotten older, as much as I love my life, this is just like what we were talking about. It's not always easy, right? I find my body not being able to move as easily as it used to, like everybody else. When I get sick, where normally if you get sick, you might be out for a day or two. It's very plausible that I would be out for 3 or 4 days. If relationships, especially romantic ones, have always been really difficult. It's hard to explain to somebody your lifestyle and what you're doing on a daily basis. And especially when it's something specific with your disability that you're trying to explain to a partner, if that can get a little dicey as well. I've been really fortunate to have really good friendships. I do have a really good family around me as well, but some of those things are getting harder, and it gets, um, we're talking about lack of representation that can get very lonely when you're trying to explain to somebody, um, because especially with my disability, and because I can do certain things on my own, a lot of people think that I should be able to do stuff that I can't, and then things that I can't do or that I can do, people think that I shouldn't be able to do. Like I can work 40 hours, but when it comes to, like, if somebody says, um, it's 5 feet in front of you, I can't drive because I don't have any depth perception. I don't have any idea what you're talking about. And that is from the brain injury. That's where the cerebral palsy comes into play. And the reason that is important, to differentiate, is because when I was, describing the different disabilities, everybody's brain who has cerebral palsy or has had an accident that's had some kind of brain injury, their brain is affected in different ways. So you might have somebody who has a disability now or has cerebral palsy or something else that is very good at, knowing math and things like that, but doesn't know how to do the other things that I can do. So it's all a matter of just kind of where it hits, but that can be really frustrating, trying to explain to people why you can do this, but you can't do this, why you're so independent this way, but you're more dependent this way. And a lot of the daily needs that you have, even when you are really independent, or not, not able to be independent, trying to explain some services to people that do not understand it, that have not been in the system, is very difficult. But that's all kind of part of it, and that's why I wanted to do this podcast also, is to talk about those things. But I've also had a lot of joy, and that's my 50. I've tried to make the most of it, and so far doing a pretty good job, and hopefully this is a big part of it too. So thank you for letting me share the start of my story, and I really hope that this has given you guys an idea of what you're going to see from me going forward. I hope that you guys will tune in again, and I want you guys to give your suggestions, feedback, if you have any questions. Again, my Twitter handle is @50, and that's the number 50 spelled out, 38, and those are the numbers 38. My email is 5050project.com at yahoo.com. Excuse me, 5050 is spelled out. So send me an email on there. I have the Facebook page. the 50/50 projects, the 50/50 project, excuse me. And then also the website, if you want to check that out, is 50-50project.libsyn.com. And I will also put that on the Facebook page if you want to look on there as well. And then you should see it post to the website here once I get that all up and running. So definitely want to thank you for listening to this. Thank you to everybody who's liked the Facebook page, and I hope you will tune in next month when we have a guest here to talk to you. And I will see you guys soon. And please reach out to me and tell me what your 50 is. Thank you.